This woman killed 600 men with makeup. Giulia Tofana lived during the 17th century in Italy when women didn't have a lot of power. But she was an entrepreneur who developed her own poison called Acqua Tofana. It was colorless, tasteless, odorless, could kill a man in 4 drops, and was undetectable after death. She sold it to women disguised as cosmetics so that they could kill their abusive husbands and live out their lives freely as widows without any suspicion. This went on for decades before officials realized she was one of the most successful poisoners in history, and she was executed. This case took 27 years to be solved. On October 22nd, 1989, 3 boys were riding their bikes in St. Joseph, Minnesota, when a man wearing a mask and wielding a gun told them all to get on the ground and demanded their ages. He told 2 of them to run away, but he abducted 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling. And that was the last time anyone saw him, but they soon had a suspect, Danny James Heinrich, who was later linked to a similar abduction of a 12-year-old boy in the area. But the problem was they didn't have enough evidence or even proof that Jacob was dead. And it wouldn't be until September 1st, 2016, as part of a plea bargain for a different crime, Heinrich would lead authorities to Jacob's clothes and remains buried not far from where he was abducted. But because of the plea agreement, he only got 20 years for the other crime and was never charged for the murder. Let's talk about Gary Leon Ridgway, who for a long time was America's most prolific serial killer based on confirmed murders. In the 1980s and 90s in Washington, he would target teenage girls and young women who are often runaways or sex workers. He would pick them up in his truck, often showing them pictures of his son to gain their trust, and then take them back to his home or a secluded area where he would strangle them. He would later say that murdering young women was his career. He would dump the women, often in clusters, and come back later to have sex with their bodies. The first 5 victims were found in the Green River, which gave him his nickname. Police even enlisted the help of Ted Bundy to catch him, but it would be DNA in 2001 that linked him to the murders, of which 49 he was convicted, although the number is probably a lot higher, considering he said, quote, "I have killed so many women, I have a hard time keeping them straight." He's currently serving a life sentence. Being single forever doesn't sound like a bad option. After hearing about the date a Swedish woman went on with a guy who she thought was American in Stockholm, he gave her chocolate-covered strawberries that were roofied. He put masks on their faces, put her in a wheelchair to get her out to his car, which he then drove to his home where he had made a soundproof bunker for her. The man, who turned out to be Martin Peter Trenborg, a Swedish doctor, planned to keep her there for years. But after only 6 days, he realized she was reported missing and took her to the police station with the intention of having her say she was safe and not being coerced. But she obviously told the police what was going on, and he was arrested, and he received a 10-year sentence. In 1997, on a dark and stormy night in Indonesia, a man was walking through a sugarcane field when he stumbled upon a body of a girl, only uncovered due to the heavy rain. And when police arrived on the scene, they discovered 41 other bodies of girls and women buried, all with their heads facing a house, owned by Ahmad Siraji, a local sorcerer. The women would go to him seeking spiritual help, but often in secret because they were embarrassed for needing guidance, and he would bury them up to their waist as part of a ritual, but then strangle them, and then he would drink their saliva. He did this because he once had a dream where his dead father told him if he drank the saliva of 70 dead young women, he would become all-powerful. Obviously, this didn't happen, but he did admit to all the murders between 1986 and 1997, and in 2008, he was executed by firing squad. Something odd happened when a police officer responded to a call in June of 2006 in Bloomington, Illinois, from a woman whose dog was barking in the middle of the night and who felt like she was being watched. When the officer arrived, who we found pressed up against the woman's house, was another police officer. His name was Jeff Pilo, a 17-year veteran officer, and what the police force realized that night was that the serial rapist who had been stalking and terrorizing women for years was one of their own. Pilo was quickly arrested, and there's even an awkward video of him online where he's being interrogated at his own station, but eventually he was convicted and given a 440-year sentence. She's the worst serial killer in Japan's history. Mayuki Ishikawa was the director of a maternity hospital in post-war Japan, where a lot of the parents of infants born there couldn't afford to raise children. So Mayuki's solution was to starve babies to death, and this went on for years until 1948 when police officers accidentally discovered the remains of some of the infant victims. She was responsible for the deaths of at least 103 babies and nicknamed the Demon Midwife, but she only got 4 years because babies had no rights back then, and it was seen as a crime of omission, not murder, and the court kind of blamed the parents instead of her. But this also caused the government to reconsider its ban on abortions, and in 1949 it was legalized. Did this girl predict the future? All her life, Kathy Hobbs had premonitions that she wouldn't live past 16. Because of it, she developed agoraphobia and refused to leave the house. However, when the day of her 16th birthday came and went and she was still alive, she thought the curse had been broken and she started going outside and living a more normal teenage life. 3 months later, she went out to grab something from the store and never came back. Creepier still is that same night her mom woke up with the sensation of being hit in the head. 9 days later, her body was found. She had been murdered by serial killer Michael Lee Lockhart, and her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The Casanova killer has been described as more brutal than Ted Bundy, yet Paul John Knowles is not that well known, even though he's one of the scariest serial killers because he has no victim type. He killed the old and young, men and women, would shoot some and strangle others, and he did this all across the US, making him really hard to track. But he didn't kill writers because he wanted them to write about him after he died, because he never planned on going to prison, and he didn't. He died by police fire. But not before he left behind secret tapes where he had confessed to the details of his crimes. 18 murders have been linked to him, but he claimed to have killed 35, and this all took place in the span of a single summer in 1974. On Christmas Eve in 2008, Bruce Pardo was wearing a Santa Claus outfit and carrying a gift-wrapped package when he knocked on the door of his ex-in-law's house in LA, which was strange because just the week before, his ex-wife had finalized their divorce. Inside the house, 25 people gathered to celebrate the holiday. When his 8-year-old niece opened up the door, he pulled out 2 handguns and shot her in the face. Then he proceeded to shoot indiscriminately at everyone inside. After that, he unwrapped his gift, a homemade flamethrower, which he used to set the house on fire. Then he drove to his brother's house and shot himself. In all, he killed 9 people. 300,000 babies were stolen from their parents in Spain between 1939 and the 1990s by a secret network of doctors, nurses, priests, and nuns. It started as a way to take babies away from vulnerable mothers who they viewed as politically unsuitable and put the babies into families who were loyal to dictator Francisco Franco's regime, but it never stopped. It turned into a money-making operation as the babies were sold to their new parents. The mothers were told their babies had died, and the adoptive parents didn't know the babies were stolen. It wasn't until 2011 when thousands of these stories finally came to light.